Hey guys, Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC. This is the tutorial for the final assembly and testing of your recoil energy absorbing dual stage buffering recoil spring guide rod assembly for high power pistols. When you receive this product, it is going to look similar to the package that you see here. It's very important that you read everything in all of the materials that you're going to receive. You're going to receive some literature that's going to take you through everything about the device, how to change the springs, how to do the final install, how to test the springs for your use. It is critical that you go ahead and you read those things and you understand this component. Once you understand it, everything gets very clear from that point. What you have there. You're going to notice inside we have a light buffering spring, we have a medium buffering spring, we have a heavy buffering spring, and then we have the recoil spring guide rod itself. You're going to notice there's a label that is wrapped around it. You cannot miss. It says stop, not fully assembled, not ready to use. Read and follow all instructions prior to use. So when you get yours, you want to make sure that you do that. The device itself looks like this. It comes partially assembled because there's a post here that threads into this piece we call the back. That post has had a drop of red Loctite applied to it. It can be disassembled in the future. In order to replace this spring, you'll need to heat it up to 250 degrees. You can do that in your oven. With a couple pairs of pliers, you'll be able to then unthread this. This is something you may never need to do. The spring inside here that it puts pressure on the ball is a very robust spring, and it is barely compressed. It's not exerting almost any energy just because it's installed, and it's a very appropriate spring for its application. So we'll notice on this end, and you see here the action of the guide rod itself, but you notice on this end it is empty, doesn't have the end cap on it. You're going to find the end cap in the heavy buffering spring bag. Reason is that's the first one we want you to install. Now, the reason we have 3 buffering springs is because buffering recoil spring guide rods are not a new concept. They've been around for years, but here's the problem that they've had. Some users can't use them because the increased added resistance at the back of the slide's rearward slide travel keeps some users with hands and that are not as strong as mine or not as strong as an average man. It keeps them from using it because they cannot accomplish a full slide rack. We've included a medium and a light buffering spring, and virtually any user can rack a slide with against that light buffering spring. When you install the buffering spring, we want you to install the closed coil end first. Then you'll have the cut coil end will go in last. And I'm going to just go ahead and show what that means. This is a closed spring coil. This is a cut spring coil. And this is made this way on purpose, and for engineering reasons. We want you to go ahead and drop that in and go ahead and install the end cap. And then you're going to install it in your high power, and it installs in place of your standard recoil spring guide rod. Your standard recoil spring guide rod offers 0 buffering of the slide's collision with the frame, we call it. That means that when your slide travels rearward and gets to its full rearward position, it is colliding with the frame. This is buffering that collision. It is that collision that causes your muzzle jump, your muzzle flip, and that feeling of the firearm's recoil when you are shooting. So what we're upgrading is this part, and we're upgrading it with our buffering recoil spring guide rod. It installs just like any other recoil spring guide rod. Now notice, this shape right here is the proper position, not this one, this one. And when you install, what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and then assemble the pistol and rack the slide. And you want to see that you can comfortably accomplish a full slide rack where you actually hear that metal to metal collision, if you will, That's what it is. It's that right there. That's what you're going to hear. That's a full slide rack. It is the slide meeting the frame at its rearward-most point of recoil. If you can do that reliably with the heavy buffering spring, use it. It is optimal. If you cannot, you're going to change out to the medium. If you still cannot, you're going to change out to the light. You're going to be amazed the light buffering spring still offers significant buffering and significant muzzle jump control or muzzle flip control over zero buffering. You want to use the spring that you can most effectively do a full slide rack. And the reason being is because if you don't do a full slide rack, you may have a misfeed when you rack the slide when you're loading the pistol. So now I've confirmed that yes, I can do a full slide rack against this heavy buffering spring. Now it's time to close up this end. And the way we're going to do that, and this is very, very important, just because I've hand tightened this end cap does not mean that this is ready for use. You must go ahead and do the final assembly prior to use. You're going to need one tool. It is a 1/8 inch hex key, and those look just like that. This end cap is a 1/8 size. It has no play in it. For you folks who like to use metric and millimeters, you need to get a 1/8 inch hex key, or you need to find a 3.175 millimeter hex key, and I've not been able to find one of those. So they usually come in 3 millimeters and 4 millimeters and 5 millimeters. So this particular part, you need the 1/8 inch hex key, or you could potentially round out your recess there for the hex key if it's not that 1/8 inch tight fit. Now there's a couple of different ways that we have found reliable to go ahead and make this part where it's not going to attempt to unscrew itself. One way that is quite reliable is your standard like plumber's Teflon thread tape. This at any hardware store, Lowe's, Menards, Home Depot, Walmart, and I think when we picked this up it cost us $1. And Teflon thread tape looks just like this. You can use this, you wrap it around the threads here, and this usually takes about 3 or 4 because these are fairly deep threads. They're fairly broad apart. And we want to tighten this relationship when we are installing. Another technique is, again, available, we found at Walmart and most of your hardware stores too, Loctite. It's called Blue 242. Now they've changed the packaging over the years a little bit, and for whatever reason they put blue Loctite in a red tube, which I think is maybe not what it ought to be, but at any rate, it says on here, Blue 242. This, you're not going to be using any oils on this part until after you have installed this cap. And you're going to go ahead and use your hex key. With that Teflon tape, you're going to get some resistance. You're going to create a much more snug relationship between those threads. And then you're going to go ahead and you're going to lock that down with your hex key. There's a nifty tool that you can do. Our 5-inch angle nose pliers are outstanding. If you don't want to scratch your part, put you a little piece of Gorilla Tape on these areas right here, and you can use that for a hold while you're cinching this down with your hex key. And likewise, if you ever want to go to a different buffering spring, or someday if you want to put in a fresh buffering spring, the same tools will allow you to go ahead and release this and disassemble it. So that's pretty much it. You'll notice that these the buffering spring is very little, if any, compressed when the device is in this position, although it meets immediate resistance of that spring, and it gets more resistance and more resistance as it's being compressed by the slide. So very simple. The tools that are optimal: a 1/8 inch hex key, Teflon thread locker tape, and Loctite Blue 242, and you're going to be up and running with this in very short order. Now, somebody asked us, well, how do I know that this is going, or how will I know that this is making a difference when I'm shooting compared to a regular recoil spring guide rod? And that's an interesting question. And first of all, we think you're going to know because this is such an effective thing. What we want you to do, though, just for your own test, is when you test this recoil spring guide rod, shoot a magazine with your regular guide rod with no buffering, and then take that out, put in your buffering recoil spring guide rod, and compare. And the reason that this is so effective is you can put this straight into your gun and start shooting. When I get on a treadmill in the morning and I put it on 4 miles an hour walking, that seems like a fairly brisk walk at first. Then pretty soon I tap it up to 5 miles an hour, and it goes 5 miles an hour for a while until I'm done. And then right before I'm ready to get off the treadmill, it goes back down to 4 miles an hour, and 4 miles an hour seems like I'm really going slow, especially after being at 5 miles an hour. So the same principle applies to this buffering recoil spring guide rod. You're going to appreciate it most if the first time you use it, shoot a magazine, let your arms and hands feel how that is with no buffering, and then put in your buffering recoil spring guide rod, and you decide for yourself. It is going to be a very dramatic difference that you're going to feel in the performance of your handgun, and you will feel it most if you have something to compare to that way. Thank you for watching very much. Thank you for purchasing this product and benefiting from it in your high power pistol. I'm Mark Allen, BHSpringSolutions LLC.